My name is Dale Bundanza. I've been in the information technology industry for 30 years in a variety of industries, including pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, medical device, security, financials, education, and many others, thanks to an extensive consultative career. Today, we're going to review my perspectives on the vision, mission, and objectives that IT leaders should follow to lead their organizations in the post-pandemic era and beyond. So first, I'm going to share my philosophy slide. So let me switch over to that slide. Give me 1 minute to share my screen. Go. So on this screen, you will see 3 core topics in the center, which we're going to address first, surrounded by 9 philosophies. So let's drill in a little further to look at the 3 core topics that we want to discuss right off the bat. People, process, and technology, in that order. Don't get it wrong. Surrounded by a nice, warm, fuzzy blanket of communication. So my tagline for PPT is that people, process, and technology, in that order, don't get it wrong. You shouldn't be implementing technology to make your lousy process give you lousy results faster. You shouldn't be implementing a process of any type that you don't have the people to support. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. So with that in mind, let's look at some of our philosophies that surround those 3 core topics. So again, let me switch slides here. First 3 philosophies we want to discuss at a high level include business drives IT, not the other way around. In the 20th century, when technology was somewhat new to many organizations, it was often assumed that IT was responsible for helping guide the company and the strategy of the organization. But as we know, here in the 21st century, where it is more common to see many strategies from a business perspective, from a strategic perspective, it should be understood that business is driving the organization and that IT is there to support the organization and the organizational objectives. Secondly, we talk about process first. Well, Dale, didn't you just say PPT and process was the second thing? Only because it was the second circle in the Venn diagram. But what we need to remember is that all things, especially within IT, revolve around process. You should make sure that all of your processes are mapped from a technology perspective and from a business perspective. Accountability. Accountability equals extreme ownership. Every organization must define who is the actual accountable organization, person, department for individual applications, systems, technology concepts. So accountability equals ownership. It's often referred to as the quote unquote single throat to choke versus responsibility. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Partnerships. Oops, I'm sorry. Focusing right on to the next slide. So let's drive to our next 3 philosophies. Let's talk about compliance. So under compliance, we have compliance with laws, with legal structures. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry, you probably have to comply with many FDA regulations. If you're within the financial industry, there are probably PII requirements. If you're within the healthcare sector, there's multiple HIPAA requirements that are required to be followed. So compliance, again, laws, and that also includes your own internal policies and procedures from a compliance perspective. Partnerships. So partnerships from an IT perspective really should be initially focused on the direct customer of an internal IT organization. So when we think about our internal customers, we think about those typical operational or sometimes referred to as back office functions like finance, HR, communications, marketing, procurement, legal, sales, engineering, manufacturing, etc., depending on the vertical of your organization. We also talk about synergizing or outsourcing. So outsourcing, you know, that trigger word oftentimes in the technology industry. But again, over 30 years, I can tell you that the IT goes through cyclical changes. It's almost about every 10 years where we consider the concepts of insourcing versus outsourcing when we talk about offshoring versus nearshoring versus onshoring. So the concept is cyclical and driven by more macroeconomic functions. But again, remember, each of these philosophies could be their own individual chapter and or class. So let me hit our last 3 philosophies, which include organizational structure, business first, technology second, and global perspectives. So organizational structure. So let's focus on who's doing what in the organization. People need to understand, especially in IT, where they fit in. Where they fit in matters. Typically, from most IT organizations, you probably shouldn't have more than about 4 levels from the CIO to the lowest level of the organization. But every company is going to vary based on their size and their own individual structure. Business first, technology second. Again, that kind of reiterates an earlier point that business drives IT, not the other way around. And lastly, a global perspective. So when we think about things beyond the 4 walls of the United States of America, you must consider things like language, culture, customs, local policies, local laws. And again, this when I say global, that can also even be interpreted to if you're only in a single state, if your organization currently only does business within an individual state within the United States, a global perspective may just be considering beyond the 4 walls of the state that you're in, if you want to become a multi-state operator, etc. So with that, I'd like to talk about my mantras that drive the 9 philosophies. So I have 6 leadership mantras displayed on the screen now. So these leadership mantras are my vectored objectives to accomplish the philosophies that I talked about previously. So let me just hit each for a very brief moment. Crawl, walk, run. That's the theory of Rome wasn't built in a day. And despite what you see on TV or in the movies, a computer nerd is sometimes often referred to, doesn't sit down at a keyboard and hack out a solution in 30 seconds that solves the world's problems. Don't we all wish technology worked like that? Now, certainly it has become significantly more advanced in the last 20 or 30 years. However, things still take time in technology. So you really need to embrace the concept of starting slow and then ramping up. Process first, not the first time you've heard that in the last couple of minutes, is it? KISS, the theory of keep it simple. So keep it simple, silly, just means that. Oftentimes, technology solutions can sound very complicated. And because many of us in IT are scientists or engineers by education, by background, oftentimes the solutions that we sometimes put together are very complex and sometimes very difficult to explain. What I try to preach to folks, especially new leaders in an IT organization, is keep it simple. Not in the solution itself, but in the explanation thereof. Accountability. You know, we talk a lot about RACI in IT. RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And it goes back to the former concept of accountability and extreme ownership. Metrics, you can't measure what you can't, you can't fix what you can't measure. So metrics is, again, an important concept within IT, making sure that you're always evaluating your key performance indicators, or KPIs. And lastly, the phrase that will probably be written on my tombstone is, you didn't plan to fail, you failed to plan. So that is to say that all good tactical executions must have a planned strategic approach. With that, I will close. Let me stop sharing my screen here for you. So with that, I'd like to close by saying, these were my leadership philosophies for leading an information technology organization and the mantras that I use to execute those 9 philosophies. Please join me for future videos that will include my explanation of proper branding for an IT leader, the first steps in evaluating a new IT organization for a senior or executive leader, and also the proper project development lifecycle, including my patented approach to a chief of staff role for any global CXO position. Again, my name is Dale Bondanza. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you at future workshops.